Hey there, house churches. So good to have you with us, and I hope you've enjoyed this series on prayer. And one of the main points about this series has been that's super important with prayer is trust. Trust in God, trust in His character and His nature, that He's working in this world. And the three areas of prayer that we focused on were asking God for things, praying for others, praying for things in this world, which is the second thing. And the third thing is confession. And we've talked each of those three. We're going to get into a little bit more practical stuff in this house church video and how those can be integrated into our everyday life. The question that I had in this series when it comes to confession, intercession, and petition had to do with trust. So for you, which one of those areas do you feel you trust God the least in? And I'd love for you to talk about that within your house church and go deeper with that. So I'll explain it a little bit more in each one of those three areas. First, confession. Do I actually trust and believe that I've been forgiven when I pray to God? Do we actually feel that that is a reality? Is that an area for you which is really a struggle? And if so, I'd love for you to talk about that in your house church and maybe get down to the core issue of why you believe or why it's hard for you to believe that reality. Or is it for you when you ask God? When you ask God, is it hard for you to trust and believe Him that He's faithful, that He's good, that He would, like a good father, when you ask, He's not going to give you a stone when you ask for a fish. And so is that an area that's hard for you, that when you ask, you actually believe that God is going to answer your prayer? If you struggle with that, I'd love for you to talk about that in house church and explain, maybe talk a little bit why you feel that's really hard for you to trust God in that. The third area is having to do with things in this world. So when you see things going really badly in this world, whether it's maybe you see marriages that are just struggling, or you see things on TV that are really bad, do you have a hard time trusting that God's at work? Do you have a hard time trusting that God is faithful? And if that's the area for you, which is the hardest area where you feel like you have problems trusting God, I'd love for you to talk about that in house church. So pick one of those three, whether it's confession, whether it's intercession or petition. Which one of those three is the hardest for you to trust God's truth in that situation for you? A light bulb moment came to me as I was preparing this sermon, and it had to do with how did I get those realities inside of me, or when I'm failing to do so, how do I get those realities that I'm cleansed, or that God is good, or that He's faithfully at work in the world? How do I get those realities inside of me? So I was thinking about back to my own life, and when did that start happening for me? When can I kind of look back and go, oh, that's when it became real for me? And I remembered going back to two experiences. One was when I mentioned a few weeks ago where I was really broken inside. Not that so much things in my life were falling apart, but internally I was falling apart. And I prayed a prayer basically which was like, God, I give up. I need your help. I can't do it, which is really this prayer of surrender. Like, I no longer have faith in me and my idea about how this world is supposed to work and how my truth is really going to make my life good. I just lost hope in that, and I just surrendered and I just gave up. It was a prayer. That's kind of was one part where the reality started to shift for me to bring those truths about God into my life. The second part happened also not at my restaurant when I was praying, but at PAC. I've been coming to PAC for quite a few years, and I remember hearing Nathan speak and kind of understanding, oh man, this guy's really smart, and I'd have the knowledge in my head. I liked listening to him speak, but nothing was penetrating here. And things started to shift after a couple of years where I'd always avoided the praise and worship time. I never really sang at all, but as I was in that environment for a longer period of time, I remember singing and praising God and thanking Him for things in my life. And that started to change Nathan's words and some of the things I was hearing at PAC, and started to do things in my heart. It started to bring the reality that I've been forgiven, not just a head knowledge, but bring it into my heart, praise and worship. So those two things together really started to bring those things into my life. I give up, I can't do it. And then praising God and thanking Him for the things that He can do and that He has done. That helped me inform my heart that I've been totally clean, that God is faithfully at work in the world, and that He's good. A conviction moment came for me a text that we find in our Bible in Mark 9. Jesus, you've heard this story before. Jesus is away on a mountain. His disciples encounter a boy who's demon possessed. They can't cast out the demon, and then Jesus shows up on the scene, and then suddenly this demon is cast out of him. And at the end of the passage it says, this kind. So it's been talking about faith. It's been talking about unbelief. In that section it says this kind can't come out without prayer and fasting. That was really interesting for me. A conviction part of it came in this reality that Jesus walks up to this boy and he doesn't pray and he doesn't fast, but the reality is that this boy is totally delivered. And it really brought a conviction to me in terms of my own life and saying faith is something, or aligning with God is something that I need to do in my everyday life. So I'm not trying to find it in the moment. And I find I've experienced that too many times where I need to pray for something, but I've had a bad week, or I've had a bad day, or I've just got, my head isn't really in the place where I can pray for somebody. And then I'm trying to find faith. And by that time, it's too late. At that time, I'm like, oh no, man, I'm just going, okay, I'll just pray. But it doesn't have the sense of like, man, I'm really believing and expecting God's going to do this right now. However, there's the times where it's been cultivated kind of ahead of time, and you just have that faith in God. You just know that God could do anything at any moment, and then something crosses your path, and you pray for somebody, and you just totally believe God's going to move in that moment. I just have a conviction in my own life to go, I want to be in that place where Jesus can, just like Jesus, he comes and he's always in that close place with God where he's just trusting God continually. And so for me, that was convicting in some of the passage, and I want to just live in that place and continue to align myself to God's truth and his reality for my life.